Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 180, recording on Tuesday afternoon, June 30th. Appreciate you guys being here. The guest for you today is none other than Paul Charchian, longtime KFAN personality, the founder of Guillotine Leagues, big time fantasy expert, and we talked all things Vikings, got into the quarterback conversation, and really ran him through the fan survey that we've got going on over at theathletic.com. So we do this every summer, ask a bunch of Vikings questions to you guys as fans, and it really provides a great snapshot of what you feel about the leadership and quarterback and team in a way that I always enjoy. So ran charged through some of that and allowed us, to dive deeper into a ton of subjects that I think you guys will enjoy. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, you can follow us over there. Give us 5 stars. We appreciate that a ton. I cover the team for The Athletic every day. We do this show 2 times a week. It's presented by First Resource Bank, who we'll get to in a little bit. Also, Pro Man Athletics, Unreal, and Great Clips. But yeah, that should do it for the early part intro of this June 30th, episode 180. And let's get right into it. Here's Paul Charchian talking NFL, Vikings, J.J. McCarthy, Kyler Murray, and much more. All right, Charch, welcome back to the show. It's been too long. You're sitting out on a patio with arguably the greatest background. I mean, definitely an Alec Lewis show history, but I would say podcast. I mean, if you can, if we, yeah, I mean, this is just that is your patio. You were telling me beforehand, it's just absolutely absurd. I've got like a dirty wall and a building in the background. This is tough, but how are you?
I'm doing great. Being right outside Zion National Park has its advantages. You wake up every day to that, and it's like, I think I'm going to work on the patio today. So
yeah.
Here we are.
That is just absolutely absurd.
It's fun. It's really fun. We'll have you out sometime, you and Ellen, and we'll hit the side by side and bring it. You actually do when we go out on the side by side. We actually go on top of all of those mesas that you saw over my shoulder. So it's a blast. It's nice
really
to live
hard.
here. I miss all my friends. That's the hard part is I miss all the Alec Lewises in my life.
And we miss you. No, it's that part of that move. I mean, we talked about it, but definitely empathize with that part of it. And the community is, it's got to be hard to replace. So we're going to talk a lot of Viking stuff here. But before we get into the local portion of what the viewers and listeners of this show want to hear and see, I want to run something by you. Because you're in tune to things around the league, and I have told some friends of mine that I am very high on the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think Mike McDaniel and what he's going to do for that run game is going to be helpful for them in the fantasy portions of the world in their lives. Do you think I'm crazy? And tangentially related, is there a team higher influence of a coach or a signing that you are very high on this year, non-Vikings related?
So super interested in the Chargers, and I think you're onto something here. This is, keep in mind, that was a team that played basically all of last year with no tackles. and they get back Rashawn Slater and they get back Joe Alt. I mean, those are first round caliber tackles, and you figure that they're going to get better that way. The running game should be very good. Omarion Hampton, Keaton Mitchell, who I like a lot, Kamani Vidal. There is a lot to like about this offense. Quentin Johnson getting better, Ladd McConkey into his third year. I mean, it feels like the offense is ready to take off if they can just avoid all the crippling injuries from last year, which they probably will. And, the Mike McDaniel is probably an upgrade. He was working basically miracles with the offense in Miami. I mean, Miami right now is universally thought to be the worst team in the league. And, for this coming season, the fact that he was able to grind out anything out of the players that he had there was pretty remarkable. So Chargers feel it's almost gotten chalky how many people like the Chargers, but I do too. There's a lot to like about that team. My favorite sneaky under the radar team, because I think you opened it up to a broader discussion. New Orleans Saints. They won 5 of the last 6 games last year. And in week 18, when they were going for their 6th out of 6, they had the lead going into the very end of the game. They poached Ryan Wright from the Vikings. And I think that's going to be a big, big signing for them, getting Ryan Wright. But Kellen Moore proved himself to be a very good head coach. Brandon Staley, good defensive coordinator. That young defense was getting better pretty much every game. And I really like what I saw in Tyler Shuck, who looked very capable. They bring in Travis Etienne. He's going to help a little bit. Kamara's probably on his way out over there. And Jordan Tyson, their number 1 draft pick. He's going to be, they need depth at wide receiver. Chris Olave's constantly hurt, so he's going to be in a spot to pick up reps right away. Saints are my sneaky team, not Super Bowl, but my sneaky team to find their way into the playoffs and just be annoying to other teams all year.
It's so funny you mentioned the Saints because I remember probably a month after the season, I'm going through my True Media statistical stuff, and I'm looking at defense, where the Vikings rank, where Brian Flores rank, and it's like an Excel spreadsheet of colors and teams and all this stuff. And the Saints defense kept popping up. And I'm thinking to myself, who was even on the Saints defense? Alante Taylor, the corner. Yes, they still have Cam Jordan and they've got guys, but Brandon Staley definitely worked pretty good with that crew. And then you think about their offense, and you mentioned Tyler Shuck, and I know some people down in New Orleans who work for that team who are very excited about Tyler Shuck and the prospect of what he could be. And I, even at the time of the draft, and I'm like, I don't know Tyler Shuck, but I'm looking forward to A, seeing how that team does progress in their second year, B, going down to New Orleans and doing that road trip. I have to think that's going to be one of the most popular of the Vikings fan bases road trips this year. But very interesting team. I'm glad you mentioned them because they're a little, and maybe just for me, out of sight, out of mind. So very curious to see what it looks like down there. I really am.
Yep. Agreed. And, this is, if when you're looking at the Vikings schedule and you see New Orleans, do not auto pencil a W there. That is a scrappy team. What Tyler Shuck brought was just gritty determination that just some dudes just don't have. And he's got it, man. He was just battling during the second half of the season. I thought he should have won Rookie of the Year. He finished second. Ted McMillan won it on a season with 800 receiving yards. I'm like, ugh. I thought Tyler Shuck should have. And he's a fine prospect. And I'm not trying to throw shade at him, but what Tyler Shuck did with a worse team and almost no surrounding help. Chris Olave's out right there. Every wide receiver's down. They're playing 5th and 6th string wide receivers, and they're winning games down the stretch. I thought that was a more impressive rookie season than anybody else's rookie season.
I'd also say you think about the division, and I mean, NFC South podcast conversation probably is not going to drive the viewership numbers galore. But like, Atlanta, it seems like they're in a weird spot, kind of specifically with that quarterback. Carolina definitely feels like they've made some additions defensively, so they'll be kind of interesting, at least for me, to watch. And then the Bucs. With a new offensive coordinator, what is that thing? Zach Robinson, what is that going to look like? And no Mike Evans, and like, it'll be interesting. But no, I'm glad you brought up the Saints, a team that I rarely ever think about. For the Vikings conversation, I told you we were going to do this, and so I know you. I mean, as you always do, you prepare, you're ready for it. But at The Athletic, we do a fan survey every summer, and for me, it's a great gauge of like, what do people think about this team? And usually it's pretty optimistic and more optimistic than what you see on social media. So I really enjoy getting to see the fans' perspective. But I thought that would be a great jumping off point for us to talk about some of these subjects that are endlessly interesting because they are related to the Minnesota Vikings. So are you good with that? I'll toss you some of these survey questions and we'll hop right in. The first one, and I think it'll just give us a good gauge for this season, was what are your realistic expectations for the 26 Vikings? And the options to answer were top 10 draft pick, record shy of 500, Vegas is about right, 8.5 wins, make the playoffs, lose early, make the playoffs, advance to the NFC Championship game, and then win the Super Bowl. When you think about 2026 Vikings expectations, where does your mind land?
I noticed lose the Super Bowl would fall outside of all of these options. So we'll take that off the board right now. And I don't know how you do win the Super Bowl, right? I mean, after all this time, that is just sheer, I guess, counterintuitiveness. Here's where I am. If you had told me that somehow magically the Vikings starters are all going to stay healthy, then I would have this team comfortably making the playoffs, hopefully not losing early, could even be conference championship quality. But to me, the biggest problem with the Vikings is a bigger lack of depth this year than any season that I can remember, Alec. And it's all because of the 4 years of bad drafting. They're just, to me, when I look at the players behind the players we need as starters, this team just can't afford to lose bodies. And just the reality of a 4-month, 17-game schedule is we're going to lose some people, and I just don't feel great about the players who would have to step up. And maybe I'm going to be proven wrong in this, and I hope I am. But I feel okay about the running back position, the depth that we've got there.
I agree.
Maybe Josh Oliver at tight end, maybe Ivan Pace at middle linebacker for backups. But I feel like this team is one injury away from guys like Jashawn Jones needing to play wide receiver, and Ryan Vandemark needing to play tackle, and Jay Ward needing to be a starting safety. And I just don't feel comfortable with the lack of proven NFL caliber talent that this team's got behind its starters. So if you ask me about from a win standpoint, I think there's somewhere between the about right 8.5 and then just maybe shy of 500 because of the injuries that are likely to happen and the quality of players we have behind them. Do you have a different opinion on the quality of the depth chart than maybe I'm seeing it right now?
No, I mean, I think if you're answering this survey with Vegas is about right around 8.5 or just shy of 500, or even potentially make the playoffs and lose early, I think one of the major factors in that being your response has to be the lack of depth. And the position that you didn't even mention that I mean, and I've banged the drum on this probably too much on the podcast and in writing, is the defensive line and on the interior and on the edge. Andrew Van Ginkel missed 5 games last year with a neck injury and then concussion issues. If you lose a player like him, expecting a rookie in Jake Golday to be your Andrew Van Ginkel is a lofty bet that I would not be willing to make. If you lose even Dallas Turner at the rush spot currently, and I would expect them to add somebody at edge rusher, you're going to need a free agent as depth to replace a guy like that. On the interior, you're obviously betting on Caleb Banks' health and his feet injuries holding up, on Jalen Redmond staying healthy, which he's proven he can do. But in the event he doesn't, then where do you land? So I probably would have answered optimistically, make the playoffs, lose early, but I could totally understand the perspective that you have in the depth being a major factor to the conversation. And I mean, you mentioned receiver. We saw it on the offensive line last year. Safety is you're right to mention that one. So it is, to your point, a direct result of a lot of draft inability over 4 years. That's just what happened. First and foremost, I want to talk about our presenting sponsor, First Resource Bank. So if you don't know about First Resource Bank, it is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area run by phenomenal people. Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson. These guys are huge Vikings fans who built a bank in this community to really just be a resource for businesses and for you guys, for me, as I want a really easy to use, sleek banking platform and, bank to work with on a daily basis. So cannot say enough about First Resource Bank. Like I said, they are huge within the community. They care a ton about this team. Like I walk into the Washington branch near the Trader Joe's down there, right close to US Bank Stadium. And I've got, walk in and people want to talk about Kyler and JJ and this team for 2026. So cannot say enough about First Resource Bank. Their information is in the description. You can set up an account and use their online banking platform. Really easy to use.
That is, it's you just don't have quality young players that are waiting for their opportunity. It's more like you've got unproven players and long shots that might get forced into action. And so the realistic side of me says there's probably going to be some big injuries, and when those hit, what can this team do if those injuries hit? So I think I would, if I had to distill it down to one answer, it would probably be the Vegas is about right, 8.5 wins. I think they can, they win games early, and then maybe, the injuries set in, they struggle late. Maybe that's how this goes.
And I also think it's like, while Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator has certainly proven an ability to elevate that unit, to have to lean on that week in and week out against the players and personnel, it's just such a lofty ask. And again, he's proven that they can overcome on that side. Offensively, I think at times when the quarterback play has risen to a certain level, they have elevated with a lack of run game. But again, if you lose, like I was thinking about this last night, which is not healthy, but I think the Vikings could be they could be very dynamic with an 11 personnel grouping that includes Josh Oliver. Why? Because then you have Juwan Jennings as a run blocker, you have Josh Oliver as a run blocker, and defenses are going to have a very hard time. If you're playing base, you probably get thrown on. If you're playing nickel, you probably get run on. But let's say you lose Josh Oliver, then you're losing kind of the flexibility that you would have with the personnel grouping. So yes, I was thinking about Josh Oliver on a Monday night on June 29th. Not normal at all, but it's something that I thought about and that I think is important.
I think it is great to know what you think about while you're in bed. And that has been one of my big questions for you that I haven't had the guts to ask until now, and now I don't have to. So now I know the answer.
I'm glad I could settle that.
No problem. At this time last year, you'll remember, as big a talking point as any for the Vikings outside of the quarterback position was, is Kevin O'Connell really ready to have a dominating run game? We had brought in Jordan Mason. We had made all those offensive line improvements, or we thought were going to be improvements. And we had thought this team was going to really go toward a balanced offense and use Jordan Mason, especially as a power runner. That never really materialized. And the offensive line was a shambles for most of the season. And that was part of why. But from a play calling standpoint, we saw a lot of passes on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. And, we didn't see the power running game come together. It'll be fascinating to see if in year 2 that it does. And, Mason could be sitting on a really nice season. Offensive line has to stay healthy, and we'll talk more about it there. But, at this point, I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to offensive line and power running game, coming together finally for this offense.
And I would say all of you watching and listening, I imagine you're probably in the same boat as Charch with that perspective. All right. We'll rattle off a couple of these questions and then get to some more weightier subjects. So number 2 on the survey was, how confident are you that the Vikings are moving in the right direction? And this was more, at least I wanted the question to be more broadly infrastructure perspective organization.
Yeah.
Where do you land there? 1 would be not confident at all. 5 would be very confident.
I'm a 4 because I'm very bullish on the team's off-season front office hirings. First, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I think, was appropriately fired in January. It was, you only get so many chances to bomb drafts, and he had 4. And you can't do that in the NFL. And he, when they hired him, given his resume, we knew that this was going to be sort of one side or the other. It was either going to be brilliant. He was going to bring all this new analytical talent and other things. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out, and they pulled the plug, and appropriately so. And frankly, I'd have done it a little sooner than they did, and that put them into the spot with Rob Brzezinski, running a draft. But love the hirings from the Seahawks. Nolan Teasley and Trent Kirchner have drafted so well. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they were able to keep Rob Brzezinski, to me, was very, very impressive. And you knew the Wilfs were really they were walking a razor's edge on trying to get Rob in a spot where you could not hire him to be GM and then not piss him off and have him leave. So I love that he's still there. But when you look at the drafting that the Seahawks have done, I mean, it's phenomenal. This is how you go win Super Bowls. Well, and also have the Vikings give up on your Super Bowl winning quarterback. But Nick Amenwari, Gray Zabel, Elia Arroyo, Byron Murphy, Devin Witherspoon, JSN, Zach Charbonnet, Derek Hall. I mean, they have drafted all of these amazing starters in the last 3 years. And so love that. And, I'm really optimistic that the Wilfs have got the right people in place with a proven track record. And, hopefully we're not grasping at straws.
Yeah. And I think your answer there, giving it a 4 and which is pretty confident. I've said this, I think I said this on KFAN, that like to see the Vikings hire Nolan Teasley and then to see him be able to surround himself with talent like a Trent Kirchner, who is obviously a Minnesota native, but played a big role from an evaluation perspective. Then marry that up with Andrew Healy, who is regarded within the NFL as one of the premier strategists from a data perspective. And then it even flowed down to, generating an advisor for him who's a former GM, will know how to handle situations, and then hiring a young employee in Azam Kapadia, who was a riser in the Seahawks front office, and then Tyler Hamblin, who was kind of a fixer within Cleveland's front office. When Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was hired as the Vikings GM in 2022, ownership really, from my understanding, didn't allow him to be able to bring a collective of folks that he wanted to bring. I think that handicapped him in many ways from the outset. Not to say that anything would have been different had they not operated that way, but to hear the things I've heard about Nolan Teasley and the others within the front office, I understand the confidence, I would say, from you and many of the other early responders to this survey. To segue, I'm going to give you these 3. So, what is your confidence level in Kevin O'Connell as the team's head coach? What is your confidence level in Brian Flores as the team's defensive coordinator? And then what is your confidence level in the Will family as ownership? You can answer all those quickly. You can go however, wherever you want to go there.
I don't know what more the Wilfs could do to be great owners. I think they are 5 out of 5 owners. And every time this comes up on Twitter, it's always like, well, go win some more playoff games. They're not on the field. All they can do is try to put the best players in place and then, hope that your people do what they should do. The Wilfs spend money freely. We never don't get guys because we weren't willing to spend up. The Egan headquarters is beautiful. They crush that NFLPA survey every year. Players want to be here. They want to be part of this organization. And the best thing about the Wilfs is they don't tinker. They let their people go make their decisions. I've never heard in all the time the Wilfs have owned, which is, I don't know, are we going on 20 years now?
Yeah.
I've never heard about the Wilfs overriding the will of their front office in making some decision. And, they just empower their football people to go do their jobs to the best of their ability. And I don't know I just don't know what more you could want from an ownership group than that. How do you feel about it, Alec? You feel like that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say from a spending, I think the tinkering part that you mentioned is it's the most important subject. It's like perhaps for me even more than just overall spending, because I've seen it. I've heard too many stories of ownerships within the NFL and in other sports meddling with decision making and impeding when the hired football executives / coaches should be making the football decisions or other sport decisions. And I will say to you, I mean, the only mandate I feel like Vikings ownership has is they do want to win every year. So they want to be competitive every year. And fortunately, they provide the resources in many instances to do that. So I think if there would be any listener to this and doesn't give them high marks, I would imagine the feedback would be how present are they to understand the internal dynamics kind of on a weekly basis. But you're writing a fine line with that of overly present versus kind of present enough to allow the football people to make the correct decisions. And what is the correct line there? That's hard for me to really discern. But by almost every regard, I mean, this ownership group provides the level of resources that you would need and kind of the I would say support that you would need to be successful. So I don't understand that.
Yeah,
that as
absolutely.
A response.
And I know there are some people that are going to hear you say, well, the Wilfs want to win every year, and they'll view that as a bad thing. They'll be like, well, we should be tanking. We should tear this whole mess down and start from the ground up. But let's remember, sometimes tanking cycles last a decade. Right? The Jets have been in a 30-year tanking cycle. The Browns have been in a 30-year tanking cycle. Willingly doing that comes with a lot of danger. And, the Wilfs know that they've been close to greatness. In my mind, if you would have had a Brian Flores and Kirk Cousins time together instead of an Ed Donatel Kirk Cousins experience, this team would have been Super Bowl ready. They've been close a bunch of times, and I'm not willing to do the big, and I don't want to do the big reset. Yeah,
it's interesting because when I covered baseball, I'll never forget former Royals GM Dayton Moore, who himself was fired, but he did win a World Series. I'll never forget him saying, like, tanking. When you tank, if you lose season after season, there are times where, like, are you sure you can just flip that switch back on? Like, we're just going to lose, and we can just turn on the winning switch and establish that within our culture. Like, are we sure that's possible? I'd also say, like, the Bears in some ways took this path, but had it not been for the hiring of Ben Johnson, who stepped in wanting to win right then, would they have been able to? And had that hire not gone as perfectly as it's gone, like, is that path, a successful path? So I think, and another critique might be, like, do they have the correct structure? Have they been able to find the correct structure of, GM and power and how to disperse that among your leadership group? I would say the current structure, as long as the drafts are successful, it probably works. It's going to be incumbent upon all of the leadership internally to kind of set their ego aside in some ways. And I think there's a belief that can happen. So the ownership conversation, I think it's an important one because it all starts there.
Yep. And if we go over to Kevin O'Connell, again, I think people can look at Kevin and go, you need to win a playoff game. And that's fair. You only get so many cracks. I think I think people have seen a lot of the stories. Basically, almost no coach will go 5 years without winning a playoff game and survive it. This could be a make or break year for Kevin. And really where the biggest thing we're going to learn about Kevin is his adaptability, Alec, and his ability to get good quarterback play from a player who does not fit his archetype that we've seen so far. What we know about Kevin O'Connell is that he can get good play from a strong-armed pocket quarterback who starts under center and reads the field, makes a quick decision, and throws accurate hard balls. That was Kirk Cousins before his injury. That was Sam Darnold, and that worked really well. Kyler Murray is none of those things. And if this becomes a real litmus test on whether or not Kevin O'Connell can adjust the style and the archetype of quarterback that has been successful in his system. And if he can get a really nice season out of Kyler Murray, what a feather in the cap for Kevin O'Connell. And that will say so much about his ability to maintain what we believe right now is that he's a very good quarterback coach. This is the biggest challenge of Kevin O'Connell's career right here.
Yeah, I think, the adaptability piece with this specific court, it's going to be fascinating. To me, to you, to the listeners, to the viewers, to people within the league. I've had endless conversations with executive scouts, coaches who are like, same conversation that you just presented of I cannot wait to see what it looks like on Sundays in the season if Kyler is the starter in terms of what it looks like with him in that specific offense. Like it is a league-wide interest and curiosity. And so it will receive league-wide interest and curiosity levels of feedback. Positive or negative. And so it's really going to be interesting. And it's also, I think, in some ways we can get blinded to that position being so important, even though it is. Like I don't want to minimize the importance of that position, but I do think this is where having an improved run game can then take, it can remove the burden of that player at that position from having to go above and beyond to then provide a referendum on Kevin O'Connell as an offensive coach. So, he is in a fascinating position in this point in his career, entering his fifth season as the head coach with this current quarterback setup that in some ways you can't say. I'd have a hard time hearing people be like, well, if you gave him Matthew Stafford for his entire, yeah, of course. It would look different, but also it is the head coach's decision, or I don't know. The head coach has major influence on what his quarterback room looks like, on who you're drafting, on who you're signing, on who you're not signing, and so in some ways the quarterback room can be a referendum on the head coach, and so for me, answering this one is hard in terms of confidence level in Kevin O'Connell because this is such a major data point. This season will be such a major data point to answering that with conviction. The Alec Lewis Show is also sponsored by Pro MN Athletics. A couple years ago, 3 guys came together, Kurt, Graham, and Tanner, and they're like, how can we make youth football in Minnesota a premium experience and productive experiences for families and for kids? And so I'd say if you have a son or if you have friends who have sons who play football, who want to play football in middle school, high school, and even have visions of playing in college, I cannot say enough about what Pro MN offers. Their website is in the description for more information, and they've got social media feeds that are active, but they have a 7-on-7 league for kids in the summer. They had a winter academy where they are teaching kids of all positions with former college players like Tanner Morgan, who played quarterback for the Gophers. Tanner also is working with a ton of elite level quarterbacks in the Minneapolis area for 2028 and 2029. So I'd say if you have if you know someone who their kid plays quarterback, they've got visions of playing in college. I cannot say enough about Pro Man and what they can offer you guys. So please check them out.
So I think sustained success in the NFL, it's three legs to the stool. It's your quarterback, it's your front office and your general manager specifically, and it's your head coach. The one I'm worried about the least is head coach. I feel like head coach is probably fine. Even if this season doesn't work out as we'd hope as Viking fans, I still think Kevin O'Connell's a really good head coach. And I don't know that things could possibly go so wrong that we get to the end of this season. And even if they don't win a playoff game and he hasn't won one in 5 years, I still don't think this team's going to walk away from Kevin O'Connell. And if they did, he'd be the first coach hired in the next coaching cycle. I don't know. I don't think this is going to be the last year of Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. I think he's too good. And by the way, funny that he's gotten snared into this Diana Rossini situation at all. I got to believe that he's just a really nice guy. Kevin O'Connell's a nice guy. Gave out his phone number. Rossini's, calls him up on the, in the middle of her traffic ticket situation, and he bails her out because he's a good dude. But I did not expect him to be him or JJ McCarthy to be catching strays out of this whole Rossini thing.
All I will say with that, Charch, is wild situation. And that's probably all I should say. I would have to imagine, but I've seen social media is what I would confirm. And it's a wild one. Brian Flores, where are you at confidence level with Brian Flores? Probably not a shock.
Yeah, he manufactures 4 or 5 wins by himself. I mean, if you look at the difference between Ed Donatel and Brian Flores, and you're like, yeah, that's about 4 or 5 wins every season that you would not otherwise have between a bad defensive coordinator and a really good one. He hides the roster defects that he's been handed with the players that we've given him, as well as anybody. And I don't know that you can, it's hard to put a price on what he brings. We don't know why he can't get head coaching opportunities. I think he should, but it works out great for Minnesota for as long as that lasts. And, I think he's going to keep signing 1-year deals under the assumption that he's going to get a head coaching job. But I'd like to see him. I'd like to see him be part of the Vikings' future for a long time. And, I hear speculation about things like, he needs to do, he needs to be a nicer guy. He needs to not rub people the wrong way. I don't know if that stuff's true or not, but he's got another season to reestablish himself as one of the great defensive coordinators. I think that's already plain to any Viking fan.
Yeah. And I think if there's any, probably like Viking fans' skepticism about Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator, I would imagine it is like against the really good quarterbacks or against, really high level offenses. Can you overcome in those specific instances? And there probably isn't a big enough sample size to really dissect that. And I also think some of that can be a glimpse into just some of the personnel deficit that they faced in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
And because of the lack of draft hits over time, this defense really has not worked with a ton of high-end draft prospects. So I think that plays a role in it as well. All right, we will we'll land the plane on two, to use our buddy Paul Allen's phrase, land the plane, on two separate conversations. The first will be quarterback. I'll ask you the question and let you roll. And then the second will be the other dynamic of the team that I think is important to discuss. So I'll ask these kind of in tandem. Who do you want to be the Vikings starter in 2026? And then who do you want to be the Vikings quarterback of the future? So those are two very different conversations and two very different paths, potentially. But how do you think about this conversation that will obviously dominate my podcast and writing when training camp begins?
Really, you're going to get tired of this one.
I already am.
It's already, I'm sure, been the vast majority of your talking time on this show.
Of course.
Like every Viking fan, the ideal scenario is that JJ gets a lot better and he's your quarterback of the future. But Alec, I just don't think that's a realistic answer based on the version of JJ McCarthy we saw last year. And I know some people have found ways to put lipstick on that pig of a season. It's bad, like nowhere near acceptable NFL level quarterbacking. And so to me, I feel like if I answer, well, I want JJ McCarthy to be the starter. I just don't think I don't think that factors in how good Kyler Murray can be and how bad JJ McCarthy was. And I know that there's positive training camp buzz and he probably will be better. Can I throw some of JJ McCarthy's stats out to you and our listening audience?
Absolutely.
Is it fair to do that? All right. So
I think statistics are always fair.
Statistics are fair. I looked at the 33 quarterbacks who threw as many passes as J.J. McCarthy last year, 243 attempts. And then I just went through his rankings. You can't use like total yards because, there are a lot of people who threw a lot more passes. So you're going to see all of these stats out of the 33 quarterbacks are all things that are just based on per stat basis, per start basis. Completion percentage, J.J. McCarthy was 33rd out of 33. Yards per game, 32 out of 33. Yards per attempt was 25 out of 32. So it's not like he was throwing difficult downfield passes. He was throwing some of the shortest passes on average in the NFL. His sack rate was 31st, obviously not entirely on him. Passer rating, 33rd out of 33. The long pass catch rate for JJ was 30th out of 33. And his long passer rating was 32nd out of 33. Those are passes of 20 or more yards. But you might be like, well, okay, 20 or more yards, those are hard passes, and he's a young quarterback. Well, let's go to his short passes. The catch rate for J.J. McCarthy on short passes of 0 to 9 yards was 30th. His passer rating on short passes was 33rd. And if you're like, well, okay, 9 yards is too far. What did he do on even shorter passes behind the line of scrimmage? His catch rate was 33rd out of 33, and his passer rating when pressured, 29th out of 33. It just a reminder of what we went through, and there wasn't enough promising parts to JJ's game for me to roll into this season feeling like realistically I can stand here and say, Alec, I want JJ McCarthy to be my starting quarterback. He has to improve so much that I can't say that right now, even though I know in an ideal world he does improve that much and he is the starter for the future.
And I think you're getting at, in some ways, kind of like a fascinating psychological thing that I find really interesting. It's like every Vikings person who wants to see this team raise the trophy at the end and have Mark Wilf get the microphone shoved into his face by Roger Goodell, which would be incredibly funny for everybody. It's like you want the young quarterback that allows every fall of your existence to feel like you got a chance and to feel like you get to go on the ride with that person and that you have the opportunity that Kansas City has had, that Buffalo has had, that Baltimore has had, where every August you're excited because you know you're in the dance because you have that guy. And so the idea of wanting that is so powerful. It's so understandable, I think, in many ways. And you're balancing that obviously with a second season of JJ's career where the production was what it was. And I mean, you laid out all the numbers there. We all watched it. There's emotions involved within it, but it obviously was not NFL starting caliber play throughout the duration. When you look writ large of what the 2025 season was, were there pockets of the potential that you want to see? Absolutely. And is it very fair to believe that a 23-year-old quarterback will develop the more time he's within the league, he's healthy, he's able to enhance some of his skill set. Absolutely. But I think I can understand ultimately when you talk about 2026 specifically why you would land where you did land in terms of what you want, and why I think the majority of people that's probably their response. But I guess I think the psychology of it is as interesting to me as anything else. And so that's why I talk about it in that way. And obviously, I'm not going to answer one way or another, because if I do, then people are going to crucify me, and I really don't want that right now. And I want to view this competition
I'm willing to take the heat.
Yeah. And I'm willing.
I don't have any problem being a polarizing magnet. That's for sure.
But it's like I do want to see how it plays out in training. But I think I'm glad you lay it out, because it's relevant to consider and just kind of to recall, I guess, in some ways.
Okay, so let's talk about this as a probable scenario. Kyler Murray is clearly the best quarterback on the team, and he wins the job, and it's not close. I think that's the probable situation. Carson Wentz came into this system cold last year, and late into late August, early September, and
it was a couple weeks before the season.
Right, played pretty well. He may outplay through the preseason, training camp, preseason games. Carson Wentz might outplay J.J. McCarthy. So, Alec, then what? What if J.J. McCarthy at the end of August is clearly the third best quarterback on this team? All things that are very possible. What does the team do then? Yeah,
I mean, it's you're putting me on the spot with the question, but I think it's at that point it will be how are the dynamics? How does the team feel? How does the locker room feel? What is how does JJ and his camp feel? And at that point, you make a decision based on the evaluation of all of that, and that's how I would expect it to go, and that's kind of what I feel like is fair to say. There are to the subset. I guess I could direct this to the subset of people who are like, you trade JJ. I mean, that's where you wade into the conversation of for what? Like, what is the actual value? Is it more valuable to net very late round draft capital versus to have the young quarterback still there developing versus how he might feel about it? I mean, there are a lot of layers to that at that point. But I do think over the course of training camp, how it develops and progresses and how all of the guys do look, both on the practice field, in some of the 11-on-11 sequences where Brian Flores is dialing up whatever he wants to dial up in some of the preseason games. Like this conversation is going to dominate because it will become quite it'll envelop attention in many ways at that time.
Oh yeah. If it plays out that way, it certainly will. It could be that the answer is trade JJ at that point and just, see if you can get a 4th round pick or something. It could be that even though Wentz is your number 2, you expose Wentz. He doesn't make the 53 man. You expose him to waivers just figuring because of his age and that, just because he worked here doesn't mean he worked anywhere, and just hope that you could get him back. Maybe that would be an option as well. And that you'd keep JJ McCarthy as your ostensibly keep him on your 53 as ostensibly your backup. But then if anything were to happen to Kyler Murray, maybe it's Carson Wentz who comes up from the practice squad at that point. Maybe that's how it would play out. This is going to be fascinating, and I think this is going to be the biggest story of late August for the Minnesota Vikings. Will be around that very possible dynamic playing out.
The Alec Lewis Show is also sponsored by Great Clips. Life comes with a lot of things to remember, and Great Clips doesn't think your haircut should be one of them. That's why they use clip notes to save your haircut details, so no matter which stylist you see or which Great Clip salon you visit, it's easy to feel like the best version of you. So do yourself a favor, say goodbye to guesswork, and hello to a great haircut every time. Download the app today, Great Clips. It's going to be great. Show's also sponsored by Unreal, the clothing brand. I'm wearing it right now with the athletic but also solid looking t-shirt. Got it in a bunch of colors, so recommend that a ton. And then throughout the fall, they've got unlimited edition hoodie drops and Vikings apparel that you can't miss it if you want to attend games or look as good as you possibly can. So cannot recommend Unreal enough. They've supported us for a while now, so please check them out. Unreal, UNRL.com. And I think, you say biggest story among the Vikings. Like I've told people, this is your turn on it NFL Live at 3 p.m. And I expect you to see purple helmets like across your TV if you're in your office at your desk and you got that on, like a lot come the fall, because you have this. You have a relevant organization with the superstar Justin Jefferson and a team that does, while there are questions about depth and a lot of facets, there is a lot of talent. And you have two quarterbacks, really three, including Carson Wentz, who are very known characters within the NFL with stories that people cling to or are passionate about in one way or another. So, it's going to be quite interesting. The last one that I will ask you, and then we'll leave it, and this has been a blast, and you know that we could talk probably for another hour the way this has gone. It is just, besides quarterback, what is the area you're most curious about with the 2026 team? And the options I gave, maybe there's one that is beyond the options I gave, but it was offensive line play, run game improvement, Christian Darisaw's availability, or Harrison Smith's future. What of the choices would you go? And then if there's one off the board that you are more interested than those, I'd like to hear it.
It's the offensive line. And Darisaw's part of that. So I get two. Yeah. I get a 2-for-1 on your answers here, right? So is Darisaw now fully healthy? We'll never know if we rushed him back too quickly last year, in and out of the lineup. He had some ineffective play that is not typical of him. So does Christian Darisaw go back to being the dominating left tackle that he was pre-injury? That's number one. Does Donovan Jackson make the move, the second year move up? I thought he was good, not great. In year one, I'm promising. Does he make a big jump in year two? Very possible. Can Blake Brandel man the center position all year? We walked into this offseason, Alex, saying the biggest gaping need this team has is at center, and the team did nothing of consequence at that position. Maybe they have a lot of internal hope for Blake Brandel. They feel like he's going to be okay all year. Don't know. I hope they're right, because we didn't really do much there. So not in any meaningful way. And then is Will Fries going to be, he was okay. He was hurt for a lot of last year. Can he come back and be the player you thought you were getting when you made the transaction last season? And then Brian O'Neill getting older. We've seen injuries start to set in. Obviously, his plays at extremely high level when he's healthy. Can he stay healthy? Can he return to the form that we've known and loved for him for the past, 8 years he's been in the league? So that's, to me, those are all fascinating storylines, because every single spot across the offensive line has got its own storyline. And, as a group, if they play really well, that unlocks and answers so many parts of this offense, giving Kyler Murray time in the pocket, opening up lanes for the running game. I mean, just so many things would be solved if we can get positive answers out of all of those players across the offensive line.
And then you've got a new offensive line coach in Keith Carter for the first time in Kevin O'Connell's time. So how does that, the infusing of I've seen it on the practice field, the infusing of more physicality, of more intensity in the workouts, how does that, play a role? And I guess, it's interesting hearing you talk, because there was part of me in my head that's like, if you get 80% level health for the whole season, let's say last year was 40% level health for that unit. Yeah. But if you said 80%, if I said to you, you get 80% health for that unit all year, then does the answer to your first question of around 8.5 wins, are you then at 10.5? Or are you then, I do think that group, again, as much as we'll talk about quarterback play, if that group, you get a certain amount of reliability, then what's possible? It's really interesting to go down that road.
Yeah, it really is. It it unlocks. It's the swing of probably 3 or 4 wins between having great offensive line play and having the line play we had last year. So the hope here is everybody stays healthy and we do get extra wins out of this offensive line, and just put our quarterbacks in a position where we can evaluate them fairly because they're not under siege every play, and we don't have to look at them as pure improvisationalists, which we know Kyler Murray can do pretty well, but we don't want him to have to do that. I'd like to get just a fair read on Murray or McCarthy or Wentz, whoever's under quarterback, because our line play is good enough to give them a chance to just be themselves.
I'm glad you said that. And I've read a lot this offseason. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's like we always want to isolate all of these components, the running back position, the tight end spot, the quarterback, and like the beauty of this game, and I don't need to tell anybody watching or listening, it's like it all does work in concert. And so, like, I do think quarterback evaluation is directly tied to what that looks like, understandably. And the run game direct evaluation is based upon what the quarterback play looks like. So it's all going to be pretty fun. We went way longer than I told you we would. Maybe we expected that. I guess. I can have you. This is why you need to talk more, probably, so that we don't feel like we have to, throw it all in. But I appreciate it. Please let the viewers and listeners know where they can find you. It will obviously be back on the show.
Charchian. Yeah,
it'll be back on the show soon.
On X at Paul Charchian. Yes, and hopefully I'll be back on with PA in my regular cadence on Thursdays. I think we're going to start in, I don't know, mid-August or something like that. Maybe out at the fair. Maybe I'll see you at the fair, Alec. That's possible. That would
be incredible. The listeners, the viewers know that's one of my favorite. I mean, the Minnesota State Fair, for some reason, I love it as much as I do. I think my family makes fun of me, but it's incredible. I love the fair. So getting to see you out there would be great. Thanks for hopping on, Charge. It was a blast.
My pleasure, my man. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you guys for being here. Episode 180 of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate Paul Charchian hopping on and going through the Vikings fan survey. If you have not, go to theathletic.com, click on the Vikings page, and you will find that fan survey. We'd love to have your answers. I will come back after July 4th weekend with a bit of a recapturing of how the fans thought about a lot of these subjects. So it should be pretty interesting, as every year, and appreciate all of you who are willing to spend your time tossing some of those answers my way. If you're new here, like I said at the top, appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the Alec Lewis Show on YouTube. Follow us, rate, and review at Apple, Spotify, or iHeart. Support First Resource Bank, Pro Man Athletics. Unreal, great clips. Their support means a ton. And with that, have an awesome middle of the week, and we will talk to you very, very soon.